With Season 2 of the Fallout show on its way as I record this, and likely out by the time you view it, I felt I would take some time to go over how the series started and how it got to where it is today. The Fallout series has changed drastically from what it started as. In some ways that's good. It's brought more people into the fandom, it has added more content to the series, but the thing is, more isn't always better, and in a lot of ways the franchise has lost a lot of what Fallout originally was supposed to be. First, a quick history of the series. Here's my one-sentence summary of Fallout. Fallout is Flash Gordon meets Mad Max. It's not a super helpful definition. A slightly longer summary, Fallout's set in a world where the future imagined in the 1950s was destroyed by a nuclear war. It's a dark version of retrofuturism that deconstructs the optimism about the future found in old science fiction, replaces it with both the existential dread of the Cold War and the pessimistic postmodernism of the 1990s. At least, that's a good summary of the original games in the series. Because a more nuanced summary is that Fallout is a series made by multiple companies with different visions of what the series is, and with different design approaches and different genres of storytelling, world building, and gameplay. But you know what? Let's start at the beginning. It's 1997. The actual beginning is Wasteland, but honestly that needs its own video, so I'm not going to go into that. So 1997, Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, is released by Interplay, an American game company. Fallout was the brainchild of Tim Kaine. After EA kind of screwed him over with the rights to Wasteland, he decided to lead Black Isle Studios, a studio within Interplay, to create a new post-apocalyptic game with a 1950s retro-futuristic twist. The game opens up with the player character being chosen to save their vault from a water crisis, just a practical problem needing a practical solution. Along the way to find the water chip, the player discovers a mutant army led by the enigmatic Master, who plans to turn all humans into super mutant. The Master believes that super mutants will be the ones to rise up and conquer the wasteland, to be the new version of humanity, able to survive in the wastes. The player also discovers new societies emerging from the devastation of the war. Shady Sands, Necropolis, the Master's army itself, the Brotherhood of Steel, all with their own visions of what society should be and their own ideas for what the future of humanity will look like. And that's the real crux of what Fallout 1 was. It was all about how societies rebuild after devastation wipes the proverbial slate clean. Fallout 1 was a 90s CRPG through and through. The player is forced into a harsh and unforgiving wasteland devoid of tooltips or tutorials. Frankly though, the jank of this game is overblown. It's really not that difficult to get running on modern PCs, and it's not some impossible to decipher system. In fact, it's pretty bog-standard CRPG mechanics and tropes, just done extremely well. This is a game that does expect you to RTFM, and then figure out for yourself what you're supposed to be doing. But honestly, that's how gaming was back then, especially PC RPG gaming. It is also a game that encourages you to try different approaches. It makes you think about your character's skills, the character you've built, and in true RPG fashion, it makes you think how to use your skills to get past the obstacles it puts in your path. Frankly, that's not how later games are really played, so it's understandably jarring for players going back to them. But it's also really the core of what the game is. The game wants you to be limited in what you can do until you earn the ability to progress. At the same time, it doesn't always tell you how to progress, and in a lot of cases, it leaves that open to you on how you want to progress. The fact that this was a PC game in the 90s really lets the dark, gritty, apocalyptic setting really shine, in a way that newer games can't, or that wouldn't have been allowed on console games even in 1997. And it is dark. The Master and the super mutants are pure unadulterated body horror with a bit of realistic crazy radicalism. You can almost understand where the Master's coming from, and yet, if he had just a little bit less humanity left, his plan may have actually worked. Dark as it may be, there's also, though, an undercurrent of hope. The world is rebuilding. Shady Sands is a new society developing, unconnected to anything before, settled by vault dwellers. People are still trying to rebuild the kinds of institutions that make up every society, despite the massive reset that was the Great War. Fallout 2, from 1998, mostly works as a sequel to Fallout 1. The player character is a descendant of the player character from the first game. Your Wasteland tribe is facing a severe drought and famine, and you need a shiny piece of pre-war technology to fix it. The Garden of Eden creation kit, our MacGuffin for this round, is a collection of devices to terraform soil, purify water, generate electricity, and it also contains stores of information that may have been lost in the war. It's not, contrary to later portrayals, a bomb that evaporates its user and fixes water purifiers at the speed of plot. It's a kit used to give Vault Dwellers what they need to survive on the surface, and they work surprisingly well if Vault City and Shady Sands were any indication. Fallout 2 continues Fallout 1's story of societies emerging from the devastation of the war. Again, these competing visions of what the future of humanity will look like are all vying for control. Will humanity be like the fascist enclave, the democratic New California Republic, the affluent, highly stratified Vault City? the lawless and chaotic New Reno. This is where the real engagement with the lore comes from for the player in these early games. At the same time, Fallout 2 was criticized for not being serious enough. There were more fourth wall breaks, references, Easter eggs in the first game it had. Already, we see different interpretations of what Fallout was supposed to be. However, like Fallout 1, Fallout 2 still takes itself seriously when it needs to. It's a really difficult balance between dark humor and just dark, but Fallout 1 and 2 managed to toe that line effectively, even if the balance was slightly different in the two games. The key to that balance really is this: the people of the world need to take the world seriously. A Doctor Who reference or a fourth wall break aimed at a fan forum doesn't really undermine the more serious bits of lore. World building is done best when even the more ridiculous parts of the war, like giant bugs and mutants, are taken straight by the characters. If you take out the Easter eggs and fourth wall breaking levity, there's plenty of darkness in this world. Slaves being killed to test out new drugs, famine and disease, literal fascists patrolling the desert looking to exterminate who they decide are undesirables. And what sells this is the characters you meet taking these problems seriously, which makes them believable to the player as a threat. And yet, like Fallout 1, there's still that undercurrent of hope. Even without seeing what it'll become in New Vegas, seeing Shady Sands grow to the degree it has ensures that you can't help but feel a little bit of hope that humanity might rebuild. War may never change, but it's not because of how people fight, it's because that in the aftermath, survivors always rebuild. One thing about all these games so far that is jarring if your only exposure to the series is the later games is how little 1950s there actually is. Sure, there's this retro-futuristic premise, but the games feel a lot more like the 90s than the later games do. A lot of the 1950s retrofuturism are aesthetic elements in pre-war rubble and in the electronics. And yeah, the ink spots play over Fallout 1's intro, Satchmo himself playing over the second, but the games themselves are a lot more Mad Max and Flash Gordon. Despite their differences, Fallout 1 and 2 are much more cohesive than later games would be. Very quickly, the identity of the series starts to get a bit confused. Starting with, Fallout Tactics in 2001 was an even more radical departure than Fallout 2 had been. This game was in fact an entirely different genre than the first two. The gameplay style is vastly different. It's a real-time strategy game controlling multiple units instead of the turn-based RPG. It keeps this veneer of the original game's character building while changing the gameplay use of those characters drastically. This game also inflates the Brotherhood of Steel to something much more than it was originally. People criticize Bethesda for this, and rightly so, but it's true that Micro Forte did it first. And even if Bethesda waffles on whether or not this game is canon, they have effectively treated it as canon by using Brotherhood airships and mentions of the Midwestern chapter. So it's clear that by 2001, the franchise was already undergoing somewhat of an identity crisis, but that identity crisis would get quite a bit worse before it got better. The one we pretend doesn't exist. It's garbage. Calling it ass would be an insult to the many fine asses out there in the world. The heavy metal soundtrack is jarring if you only played the later games, but far more jarring at the time was the hack and flash gameplay and the absolutely awful voice acting. Oh, and the Balls energy drink. A real-life product tie-in. Was it trying to get Balls drinkers to play Fallout or get Fallout players to drink Balls? I don't think it worked either way. Balls, by the way, for those of you who've never had it, is terrible. It didn't even taste like balls. It was so much worse. And the weirdly dildo-esque glass bottle, the very symbol of forbidden fruit, just served to drive production costs and thus price ups that no one in Fallout's target market in 2004 would buy it as anything other than a maybe one-time curiosity. And after they realized how not worth it was, I guarantee every single one of them went just right back to drinking Monster. I don't even know if they make Balls energy drink anymore, and I don't really care to find out. But I digress. It's important to realize, although Interplay made this game, no one at Black Isle was actually involved in it. Interplay made this game with a specific purpose. They wanted to break into the console market. A fast-paced, rock music and energy drink-filled game from what was Interplay's biggest franchise probably seemed like it would do that, but it flopped and it flopped hard. The bigger picture was that Interplay was already being mismanaged by that point, and a casualty of that would be Fallout Van Buren, the Fallout 3 that never was. There actually is a playable demo floating around on the internet. Go play it if you haven't. It's like a glimpse into another timeline where Fallout stayed a proper RPG. A lot of its ideas did get worked into New Vegas, but still. Van Buren was cancelled in 2003, actually prior to the release of Brotherhood of Steel. Brotherhood of Steel really was a Hail Mary for Interplay. And by that I mean they were praying to Mary that it would work. I don't even know what a Hail Mary is in football terms. Is that football? I don't really know. Doesn't matter. But again, you can see the big picture here. Fallout's main series may have had a specific vision, but other forces were pulling it apart. Not long after the disaster that was Brotherhood of Steel, Bethesda acquired the series much to the chagrin of Troika and Obsidian. Tim Kaine was effectively cut out of a franchise that he had created for a second time. In 2008, Fallout 3 was released by Bethesda. To say that this was a change is a drastic understatement. The game was no longer a turn-based RPG where skill checks determine the success of your actions. Instead, it was a first-person shooter with some light RPG elements where you ran through post-apocalyptic set pieces that looked like the bombs had just been dropped even though it was 200 years later, and immediately fans of the older games derided it as Oblivion with guns. And yes, it's true, Bethesda included the VAT system and as a way to try to appease older players. But that's just not a replacement for a true RPG system. It's a gimmick more than anything else. Skill checks were almost entirely replaced with skill rolls. The early games had both, but reserved skill rolls for specific elements of gameplay where it kind of made sense for there to be some randomness. Lockpicking, hacking terminals, for example. Fallout 3 nonsensically applies these to speech checks for some reason. The game shifted the setting to the East Coast, ostensibly to avoid messing with established lore, but yet they still brought iconography, like the Brothers Steel and the Enclave, to the East Coast for the sake of marketing. They needed that imagery to connect the games, like the Fallout name. But divorcing those elements from the context left them feeling sterile and forced, like they were only there because they knew they were characters in the video game. Oh, and they killed off Harold. What the fuck was that about? Bethesda also leaned heavily into the 1950s retrofuturism. One would be forgiven for thinking the war had happened in the 1950s, according to Bethesda's vision of the series. And I think the radio is a major part of that. I do like a lot of the music in the radio, and I understand that the 1950s music is given a handwave by Three Dogs, but it's also a major departure from the tone of the older games, which really only used atmospheric ambient tracks, outside of the intros. At any rate, Bethesda's first foray into the series was a massive shift in every element. Gameplay, tone, mechanics, so much more than the confused identity of the early 2000s fall. And yet it sold extremely well, mostly to people who had never played Fallout. The OG fans either complained or sequestered themselves away on No Mutants Allowed. That didn't stem the tide of new fans coming in with Fallout 3 as their only frame of reference for what Fallout was. Now, Obsidian had tried to get the rights to make Fallout 3, but had been outbid by Bethesda. However, after Fallout 3's success, they were contracted to make a side game in Fallout 3's engine. And so, in 2010, Fallout New Vegas was released to the delight of trans people, misogynists, and bronies the world over. The game was better received by fans of the original Fallout than Fallout 3 had been. While still not a proper RPG, it continued in the world-building traditions of the original games. The West Coast was back, with old players like the NCR, the Khans, and followers of the Apocalypse facing its eastern factions like Caesar's Legion, and Mojave power players like House and the Kings. The Enclave and the Brotherhood were both portrayed in a manner more consistent with Fallout 1 and 2, and hell, Marcus even made a reappearance. And yeah, we all know how Bethesda withheld Obsidian's bonus based on Metacritic score, how Obsidian was made to crunch the game in an unrealistic fashion, but let's be honest, that's not really on Bethesda. There are plenty of criticisms you can make about Bethesda, but Obsidian, a gringo shitty contract, isn't one of them. Especially about the Metacritic score. They missed it by 1 point, I think, but I mean that just means the terms of the agreement were not fulfilled. I don't know why people think it's so unjust of Bethesda to hold Obsidian to the agreement they made. It is actually impressive, however, when you understand all of that Bethesda was able to make this game as good as it was, despite everything. The game has a legitimately amazing story. It manages to bring back elements from 1 and 2 without them feeling like just being hollow references. Elements like the NCR, Marcus, the Khans, even Gunrunners all feel like substantive parts of the story and the world, and not just references to tickle your nostalgia. Gameplay-wise, New Vegas is much more similar to 3 than 1 or 2. Yeah, some perks are different, skill checks don't work the same way, but for all the shit people give 3 and 4 for removing RPG mechanics, New Vegas does just as much. It's still just Oblivion with guns, and it's still not a CRPG experience. A speech check occasionally doesn't change that much of the gameplay is still running and shooting, but New Vegas, for all its rabid fan base, would pale in popularity compared to